So it is settled. Louis has been paid, and now we can focus on hockey.
Well, I do agree with you that if for somehow on this trip you were attacked in a dark alley with your knees taken out by a baseball bat, that we would have all come back and thought that maybe Lou Nanne arranged it.
Had something to do with it.
Is there a possibility that if we roll back the cameras at this meal that I was the one that made the bet? I think
it's entirely possible, because
I think it is too. Welcome back to Worst Seats in the House. Michael Russo, Anthony LaPanta. I'm coming to you from Vegas. Anthony coming to you from New York City, where the Wild coming off a much-needed and very well-played 3-1 victory, 3-1, right? Victory over the New York Rangers last night. I'm out in Vegas, went to the Carolina Vegas game yesterday. Might have been a Stanley Cup preview, Anthony. Those two teams, outstanding. Carolina looked like they were going to tie the game up until Keandre Miller turned the puck over. He was a little helped on the way by Barbashev, scored a breakaway goal and put the game away. But man, what a good hockey game. And you saw one at the Garden. Our next live show is October 27th. That is next week at Tuttle, 7 p.m. So definitely come on out for that. And the big news out of last night's game, Anthony, Danila Yurov gets his first NHL goal. He's elevated in the lineup with Marco Rossi's injury, the first really of his career that kept him out of the game. And as we talked on last week's pod, I thought that he would have a big road trip, and obviously gets his first NHL goal. And it turns out to be a game winner against the probably most famous Russian goalie out there in Igor Shesterkin.
Yeah, maybe the best goalie in the world, and a countryman for him that I'm sure was exciting. There was a little bit of that going on in last night's game. Maybe the biggest save of the game was Gustafsson stopping his countryman, Mika Zibanejad, point blank late in the game with the Wild in front 2-1. But to go back to Yurov, I think it was indicative of a trend for him over these last 3 or 4 games, where I think his game has just been getting better and better each night. He's looked more confident with the puck. I talked to John Hines about him a little bit before the game in New York yesterday and asked him about Yurov's game, because with Rossi out of the lineup, they had to make some adjustments to the lineup, and he and Ryan Hartman had to move up. And it was interesting because in the morning, the way the Wild ran their lines, it looked like it was going to be Hartman with Tarasenko and Johansson, and then they changed their mind sometime in the afternoon and went with Yurov with that group, and it paid off with the game winner. We can talk more about the rest of the lineup later, but just to focus on Yurov, I thought we've talked throughout camp. They kept saying, yes, we need more production. We want to see more production, but we trust his game. It's evident he plays the right way. And now I think we're starting to see a guy trust, not just that he knows the system and is a responsible player, but a guy capable of making plays.
Yeah, and it's funny, Anthony, because I know that we always talk about the American Hockey League as the second best league in the world, and it might be. But the KHL is a professional league, and I remember the silver lining of Kirill Kaprizov constantly re-signing in the KHL was that you knew you were getting a more NHL ready player once he got over to North America. And even though Kaprizov, when he got here, was 2.5, 3 years older than Yurov, when Yurov signed that 1-year extension in the KHL, I thought it was a good thing. One, I thought it would be better that he would play another professional season in the KHL, and two, the fact that he only signed for 1 year told me that he definitely wanted to be an NHL player and would make the transition over here. And he's done that. He obviously has to bide his way up with the lineup. The Wild, I'm sure, would at times like to play him at wing on the second or third line. But right now with Nico Sturm's injury and Hunter Haight in the minors, they really need him playing center. And then he gets the elevation yesterday with Marco Rossi out of the lineup. The one thing, and we talked a little bit about it last week when we were both in Dallas, Anthony, but the one thing I will tell you is, I think that we all take for granted and discount too much how difficult it is to be a 21-year-old from Russia speaking very little of our language here in the United States and coming over here, and your parents can't get a visa, your partner can't get a visa. And, he's probably not going to see his family until Christmas time at the earliest. And so I just think that for him to go to New York and have a couple familiar faces around, and his agents coming to the game and taking him out for coffee, for him to go be on the ice yesterday with 5 or 6 guys on the New York Rangers that he even knows from training with them this summer, I just think that sort of eases you as well. And I also love the fact that with Jakub Trenyan, who's from his hometown, Tarasenko, Kaprizov on this team, I think that, he has a lot of support here that's helping him assimilate. And I think that we're going to continue to see his game get better and better, obviously, given the ice time that he's given once Rossi gets back.
Yeah, we'll have to see where and how the lineup shakes out when Rossi comes back. And remember, the team is hoping that we're 4 or 5 weeks maybe away from Matt Zuccarello coming back. So that's 2 guys that are going to fit back into your top 6. And, Yurov, I think, looks like a player that, let's assume that the trend and the trajectory continues, that he's a guy who probably lands somewhere in your top 9, whether that's at center or wing. I don't think really matters at this point in his career. More important for him just to be playing. And to go all the way back to where you started, the comment you made is the KHL, it's a great league. It's just different than the American League. And so it can provide a good spot for guys to improve, especially young guys. But it's because they're playing against older, stronger, more experienced players, where the American League might have more raw talent. It's a lot of times it's guys that are in the same point in their careers as you, guys that are young, trying to find their way. And there are clearly some veteran guys down there too. The I don't want to call them, it sounds worse than it is to call them, like fill-in guys and roster placeholder type guys, but the more veteran guys like a Jones or a Pitlick or something in the Wild situation, where it's guys that have proven themselves in the NHL to be viable. They might not be parts of the future of an organization, but they're valuable guys now. So there's just a difference with the type of guys you see in those 2 leagues. And I know both leagues like to call themselves the second best league in the world, and they're just different leagues. And so I think, yes, there was a point where when you're an 17, 18, 19-year-old kid, and all of a sudden you're playing against 24-year-old, 25-year-old men in the KHL, it's a valuable developmental league. There's no question.
Yeah. And it is, in a lot of ways, it's just a more professional league, just from the standpoint, like, you are getting paid significant dollars, not NHL dollars. You're getting on airplanes to go to your next cities, as opposed to, most trips being bus trips. It's a different thing. And I just think that you look at a lot of the people running, the Fedorovs and former NHL coaches over there, like the Bob Hartley's of the world and people like that. I just think that now Gerard Gallant's over there. It's just, it's not that it wasn't the worst thing in the world. And I think he came over here more of an NHL ready type of player. And I think that we'll continue to see him go up. To your point on what you said is it doesn't matter if he plays wing or center. I totally agree with you. Right now, it doesn't matter, but they envision him eventually being a center in this league. And, as the Hartmans, as the Hartmans age out, and he's going to slowly work up the lineup. But, when Rossi comes back, he's probably going to have to go back down to the 4 hole, because right now they need a center. And unless they're going to put Hinostroza at center or play a Ben Jones or somebody like that at center, they need him at center. But I think that what this continues to do is give John Hines a realization that, you could always figure a way to move him up in the lineup, maybe give him more ice time. Last night he played the power play with Rossi out. So he's, it's the natural maturation of a player, and he is still 6 games into his NHL career. And I think that we all just got to continue to be patient. But when Rossi comes back, he's going down to the 4 hole, and fans need to understand that. Like, that's just the way that life is.
Or he might end up as a 3rd-line winger or something. But yes, at center, that's the reality. Marco Rossi is a more proven NHL player than Yurov is at this point in their careers.
Yeah. And what I do like, and you mentioned his play with the puck, is that his battle level is just so much better. Like you just see the continued growth as he's getting used to NHL rinks and rival buildings, and he's playing well like that. Yesterday he wins 50% of his draws, so he's the areas that you want to see him getting better at. He's getting better at, and he already came here as a very responsible defensive player. So I think the sky is still the limit for him to be a middle six type forward. I know that in my Danila Yurov story that I did when I visited him in Stamford, Connecticut, a couple months ago, I talked a lot about Pavel Dorofeev in there, and I don't mean to always kind of, bring the two of them together. But the reason why I will is, again, and bring them up in the same sentence, is that I watched Dorofeev play yesterday. And Dorofeev, in a lot of ways, now Dorofeev, I think, is going to be a proven goal scorer in this league. He looks to me like he's going to be a much better goal scorer than Danila Yurov will probably develop into. But they're represented by the same person. They train at the same center. And Dorofeev is somebody that has substantially just gotten better, especially in the areas that they probably that he needed to get better in, and that Yurov's going to need to get better in. And that one is his skating. Like last night, he is a monster on the ice right now with his skating, with his ability to play with the puck. And he scored another incredibly beautiful goal last night for the Vegas Golden Knights. And the reason why I bring the two of them up is Dorofeev 2 years ago, when he started at this Prentice camp where Yurov is, he was a very raw player. They really, it wasn't just in the weight room that they wanted him to get stronger at. Is can you gain a step or two on the ice? And that's the one area that Ben Prentice really worked with Dorofeev on. And I think if Yurov continues to come over here early and work out at this place, and if he can gain an extra step or two in his skating, Anthony, I think that will absolutely help him, because that's the one area that I still think that he needs to work on a little bit.
Well, improving skating can help quite literally every player in the NHL. I mean, and especially young players like that. I think with Yurov, I just think, to me, it looks like, when we watched him in camp, it was a guy who looked like he didn't even, and this will be an exaggeration, but it appeared that he wasn't even a guy that was trying to make plays. It was more just survival mode on every shift. And now he's starting to look like a guy. The goal he scored it isn't like it's a play you're going to put on a highlight reel, but he went to the net, he found a puck, and confidently finished. And with, Shesterkin was down and out of position after what was really a terrific play by Johansson to create it with his speed on a wraparound try. But those are the type of plays that goal scorers finish. And, maybe Yurov has a little bit of that in him. We'll find out. And really, again, I don't want to jump ahead of the topic that we're on right now, but it was indicative of the Wild's play all night. Was they were willing to get inside the Ranger defense, to go harder to the net than they had been earlier on this road trip. And Yurov's play was a perfect example of it.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's a perfect segue to talk about the rest of the game. I couldn't agree with you more, Anthony. The biggest injustice of that first period is that they didn't come out with like a 3 or 4 goal lead. They were outstanding. The Rangers were on the ropes. That continued in the second period. And I felt, even in the third, when the Rangers pushed, it was still the most consistent game the Wild had played from start to finish this year. And I'm including opening night in St. Louis, where they won 5-0. Remember, there was a huge moments in that game where the Gustafsson had to be great, because the Wild weren't getting any shots and were, pretty much, I wouldn't say on their heels or on the ropes, but certainly not gaining a lot of offensive traction. Last night was as good as we've seen them. And again, Boldy and Kaprizov, without a doubt, had their best game of the road trip of the 4 games they played so far on the 5 that ends in New Jersey in 2 nights.
I thought they were great. I thought the Hartman, Foligno, Hinostroza line was awesome. I didn't look after the game, but at the end of the second period, their expected goals for was about 90 at 5-on-5. I thought Hinostroza was visibly faster. Hartman made some plays. Foligno was effective, creating loose pucks on the forecheck. And as a team, from the drop of the puck, they were just ready to play. The 5-on-5, I happen to just be looking it up right now because I was building some stuff for the game in New Jersey and wanted to focus on the starts. And you're talking about a team that had come off of games in Washington and Philly where they had 14 and 16 shots in the two games and then had 18 in the first period. And 33 shot attempts 5-on-5 in the first period against the Rangers. That was almost as many as they had in the first three games of the trip combined. And when you throw on top of it that having lost three in a row and then give up a goal in the opening minute, it wouldn't have been shocking to see a team reel for a while and maybe for the rest of the night. And instead, not only was there no sign of that, they just came out as if they had been shot out of a cannon on the next shift. And I think it was a really impressive performance. I thought Mike Sullivan, the head coach of the Rangers, comments after the game were interesting because the Rangers, a lot had been made of the fact that they hadn't scored at home in their first three games, which they hadn't. But if you looked inside the numbers, they were creating chances. They were 3-0-1 on the road. And there was a lot of talk with other media members and around the team. Like, nobody was concerned with how the Rangers were playing. And after the game, he said, this was not indicative of the way we've played all season. This was not good enough. He said, we got outworked. We knew we were going to face a team that was, because of circumstance, in a desperate spot, and we didn't match it. And I just thought it was interesting to hear those comments because they were very similar to what we heard from John Hines after the game in Washington earlier on the trip, where he said it isn't much more complicated than we got outworked tonight. And now in this game, the Wild were on the other side of that. And it looked about the same as what the Capitals had done to the Wild a few nights earlier.
Yeah. Igor Shesterkin is 2-3 this season with a .957 save percentage. I mean, that just shows you how little the New York Rangers are scoring this year. And, it is funny. Everybody was talking about history, and if they get 7 minutes, it would be the most consecutive minutes at home without a goal. And then they score 57 seconds into the game, and then they create a new.
It would have been a record. The team that they were chasing was the Pittsburgh Pirates.
Yeah.
That tells you how long ago it happened, 1928.
Yeah. And now they've gone 59 minutes at home without a goal. We'll be right back on Worst Seats in the House.
Aquarius Home Services takes water treatment to an all-star level with the Connecticut water treatment system. They remove the worry, and you just turn your water on and know that it's safe for your entire family. It takes care of problems like iron and rust, hard water that leaves those spots and buildup in your appliances, contaminants like lead, arsenic, and even those forever chemicals absolutely vanish. And here's the really cool thing. It costs you nothing to get a water analysis and to discover what's going on with your home's water. A trained specialist comes to your home, tests it right there, and goes over all the results right in front of you. It's like a chemistry experiment. If there are issues, they provide options to solve the problems. And right now, you can get up to 25% off a Connecticut whole home water treatment system and 6 months, no payments, and no interest financing. Be sure to contact Aquarius for how all this works because the results are life-changing. Last week, Mark came to my house and changed the filters in both my water softener and my Connecticut drinking system for the hat trick. Worry-free water to drink, worry-free water for cleaning, laundry, showers, dishes, and more. And all this with on-demand efficiency that uses zero electricity. It's that simple. Aquarius is just a click away at AquariusHomeservices.com. That's AquariusHomeservices.com. Aquarius, earning the right to be recommended. And don't forget to mention that Russo sent you.
Deer hunting season is here, and it's time to own your odds with OnX Hunt, the GPS hunting app trusted by millions of hunters. With the Hunt app, you'll have access to nationwide public and private land ownership information, waypoints, tracks, and much more, all at your fingertips. Go to onxmaps.com/hunt. That's onxmaps.com/hunt to sign up today.
Hey, Mark Rosen here for Stretch Lab. I had my introductory first stretch when I was visiting my relatives in New Jersey. I went to the local stretch lab there for my 50-minute session. I felt so good afterwards. And when I came back, I immediately called that stretch lab in Eden Prairie. They have locations all over the Twin Cities where my nephew first signed up. I've been hooked ever since. There are locations I mentioned throughout the Twin City area, but I stuck with my Tuesday morning appointment with Jason to get my 50-minute stretch in as part of my schedule. It's like a meditation session. He stretches out my legs, my hips, my back, my neck, my traps, all of it. And I take some deep breaths and I feel like a new man every single time I leave. My nephew's in his late 20s. I'm a little bit older, but it doesn't matter. Stretching is so important in our daily routine. Having an expert do the work is the only way to go. My advice, give Stretch Lab a chance to improve your overall health. Check out a location near you.
Hey, this is Randy Shaver. Along with Kevin Gorg, we host the show Fantasy Huddle on Talk North. Each week, we're going to break down the matchups for the NFL season and try to give you the best chance to win your fantasy football games each and every week. Join us for Fantasy Huddle on Talk North.
Back here, Word Seats in the House, Michael Russo, Anthony LaPanta. October 27th is our next live show. That's 7 p.m. at Tuttle's. Anthony, I saw on Instagram that you finally paid your debt to Lou Nanne. It's about time.
I did, and I still will argue, and even when we were talking about it that night, I don't doubt for a minute, and I know we've talked about this, I think, but you and I were at the same table. I don't doubt for a minute that Louis threw out a number because that's the way Louis thinks. I don't doubt for a minute that I would have said, well, boy, that seems higher than I would guess. But there is zero chance that I would have felt strongly enough about it to bet with the guy. But I did. I stopped at a bank on my way to dinner. I wanted so badly to get $50 in pennies and throw them on the table, but they didn't have pennies at this Wells Fargo branch, which coincidentally I walked in. I said, okay, I need $50 in pennies. And she looked I said, I just need them in a bag. And I had brought a laundry bag from my hotel in case they didn't have a bag. And she said, our branch is closing permanently in 3 days. We don't have that many coins. I was like, well, I'm sorry to hear that. Are you out of a job? And said, well, I have an opportunity to transfer. I said, okay, how about you have like nickels or quarters or anything? She said, we have no coins. So I said, all right.
I haven't seen a coin in 25 years.
Right. I said, I'll take $51 bills. So then I wanted one of those little paper straps, that they put around it. And they didn't even have a 50 in that. They said the only ones we have left say 100. I said, okay, perfect. Give me $51 bills. Put the 100 thing around it, because then I'm going to tell Louis he owes me $50 because and see if he notices. But to Louis's credit, he threw the 50 into the middle of the pot to help pay for the dinner tab. But yes, I settled the mythical bet that now everybody can relax and be happy. And I told Louis that night, I said, we both have a Vinny in our family, but I've heard enough stories of you with mafia members named Guido or Bruno or whatever, El Rocco, that I don't need to piss anybody off. And, we are in Manhattan. And I remember, you remember some of those stories of Louis talking about his old dealings early in his career with unions and things, where he'd be like, I'm meeting with this guy, and he says, I don't sit with my back to the door. I don't know if I would have stayed at dinner if that was the guy I was eating with, but so I just figured I better take care of it. And so it is settled. Louis has been paid, and now we can focus on hockey.
Well, I do agree with you that if for somehow on this trip you were attacked in a dark alley with your knees taken out by a baseball bat, that we would have all come back and thought that maybe Lou Nanne arranged it.
Had something to do with it.
Is there a possibility that if we roll back the cameras at this meal, that I was the one that made the bet? I think
it's entirely possible, because
I think it is too. But
I even overheard the argument recently in an XL Energy Center press box about other guys' contracts.
I know
all I can think about is that's exactly what I think probably happened at dinner. Is you might have been willing to bet him there, because I'm just saying. Me well enough. I have opinions on a lot of things, but salaries for players is not one of them. Yeah. And there is quite literally a 0% chance that I would have made a bet with Lou Nanne when it came to how much money a player is going to make. I wouldn't have.
I don't remember me being the one, but I would say to you that Louis definitely and I have had our share of brawls over the years, and you witnessed one in the press box the other day. It's funny. I was at the cigar place in here in Vegas 2 nights ago, and I was sitting at the same group of chairs behind this pillar in front of this TV that I went with Bill Garrett and Lou Nanne once, and same thing, I instigated a fight between the two of them that was one for the ages. I won't say what it's about, but I will tell you that about a year and a half ago, Louis and I got an unsolicited text from Bill Garrett saying, by the way, that night in Vegas, you two were right. So he finally came around to our side. The thing about the pennies that I don't know if you remember the story I've told you. I've probably told it on the podcast before, but my freshman year of college, I came home in December, and I wound up starting to work at the Sun Sentinel full time, and essentially didn't go back to University of Florida and started going to school down in South Florida and continue to work at the newspaper. And around like late January, I get this bill in the mail. It was forwarded to me from my college freshman roommate named Trey McMorris III. I'll never forget it. And it was like a bill for like $11.58, saying that I owed this for the phone bill. And I went to Citibank, got $11.58 worth of pennies, spent about $12 in postage, and sent it up there to him because I thought that was ridiculous that he would send me the bill.
It would have had a better effect if I could have dropped the bag of pennies on the table in front of Louis and made him carry it home. But I mean, we've had a lot of fun with Louis on this trip, but Louis doesn't like to be inconvenienced by stuff like that. So it would have been great to just be able to, he didn't want to be inconvenienced by having $51 bills. He was trying to talk the guy there into trading it into bigger bills for him. He wanted a 50. Here, I'll give you a 50, give me 100. But last night, Kenny Albert gave him a copy of his book. And when we were coming back to the hotel afterward, he didn't want to carry the book around. So he wanted to give it to Tom Reed to say, put this in your bag and give it to me tomorrow on the bus. And it led to a conflict between the two because Tom's like, what, you can't carry the book? Like, what am I? I'm not your caddy. And he was like, well, I don't want to carry the book around. He just does not. He's a guy, a creature of habit. He's set in his ways, and there's only one like him. And it's been an absolute honor to get to work with him over these years. And every time he's on one of these trips, I leave he's the most amazing. I don't know what he is, 84 years old, then still going strong as he is right now. All of us should aspire to be that active, that sharp at 84 years old.
Yeah, amen. And you guys look great together on TV, sound great together. And I'm always amazed for somebody. I know he's done TV for 50 years, but let's be honest. And I know
63 years. I think I've heard it a few times on this trip.
Yeah, I know. But it's not like he does it every single day. So for him to always just step back into the booth for the first time in 7-8 months and be as absolutely one at ease behind the camera, but two, sound as good as he is, because it's not easy. I mean, the greatest hockey players in the world have put on an earpiece and a microphone and can't do it. Right? They look like a deer in headlights, and it's a whole different animal when you got a producer in your ear and you're looking at a telestrator, and for him to always just step right in and be as comfortable as he is, I think it's pretty impressive.
It's really impressive, and I think beyond that, I think what is overlooked sometimes is how connected he still is to today's game and to this Minnesota Wild roster, to the NHL. It isn't just a bunch of stories about the 1970s when he was playing and the 1980s when he was running a team and even the 1990s when he was active in the television broadcasts. This is a guy who follows really closely what's happening in the National Hockey League. And when guys' names come up, I remember they traded him for this guy, and this year he's been doing this. And when he first came up, he was great in this area. And it really is amazing how connected he stays to it. And I know he watches a ton of games, and I see this a little bit over the last, what's it been, probably 8 years maybe now, since I've had just one partner for a season on the air. And there's a lot of nights where you have to catch yourself a little bit. Like, was he there with me on that trip? I'm talking about when I'm working with Ryan Carter or Al Stalock or Wes Walls or any of those guys. And sometimes it'll just be like, there was that night where after the game, John Hines said this, or Bruce Boudreau said this, or Dean Evison said this. And you kind of have to think about it quickly. Like, was he with me there? Can I bring this up to him? Do I know that he saw that game? And with Louis, you would think you'd have to worry about that a lot just because he's around the team so infrequently. But I don't think about it much because I know he watches almost every game. And I don't bring it up just to protect him, because I don't want to say things like, you remember that play in Boston the other night where this happened? I would never do that. But it's amazing the number of times he will just bring it up and say, this guy did this when the Wild were down in Dallas, or this guy did this on opening night against St. Louis. And I'll just think, I know you weren't working that night, but yet not only was he watching, he's got it locked into his memory. It's really impressive what he's able to do. And for people like me who grew up in the Twin Cities, when you hear Lou Nanne's voice, it just immediately means credibility in the hockey world. And I've listened to him do so many games over the years, whether it's North Star games or I didn't hear him when he did Hockey Night in Canada games, but the high school hockey tournament for my entire lifetime was Lou Nanne and Lou Nanne's voice. And when he talks, it just immediately brings you this comfort level and trust level that whatever he's about to say next, I believe. And for hockey fans all over the state of Minnesota, I know that that's the case for a lot of them. It's maybe the most recognizable voice and identifiable name in the history of Minnesota hockey.
Yeah, absolutely. Bruce Cusack, who's the Vegas Golden Knights PA announcer. He's incredible if you've heard him. And he used to be the Vikings. He's everybody, right? I mean, I remember the lacrosse team,
he's a part of the show in Vegas, his delivery and everything even just the way he starts it every night, like Vegas,
last night at the Carolina game, how he does when he announces at first, 15 minutes before the game, who the Golden Knights are playing, he'll impersonate, so if it's the Minnesota Wild, he'll do a you betcha. Well, last night he did a little Southern twang with his Carolina Hurricanes. It was hilarious. But anyway, so Bruce, I'm leaving the arena last night. I run into him. And just to tell you what a saint Bruce is, there's a woman that works at the arena that he just that he always worries about going to her car alone. So he'll basically escort her out. But anyway, I run into him, and what he does an R-rated Lou Nanne impression that is hilarious. But what's funny is it's not exaggerated, because you and I have been with Louis off the air, and it is Louis to a T. So it's hilarious, and I know whenever he does it for Tom Reed, Tom absolutely loves it. So pretty cool. All right, let's talk.
Those two are classic once they get rolling, giving each other grief and old stories. It's priceless when you get those two guys together.
Absolutely. All right, let's talk a little bit more about the team. By the way, who I just ran into in the lobby of my hotel? The son of the mayor of Detroit Lakes, Minnesota, Jake Brink, who did the Golden Knights game last night. He's doing speed flying to Utah to do the Mammoth tonight. But what a great dude that is, and he has turned into an unbelievably good referee. Last night, he was so on point throughout the game. There were a couple of calls that he caught on, one on Nikolai Ehlers, one where Ehlers was slashed, and I'm like, how do you even see it? But he has turned into a really, really good referee. Want to talk to you a little bit more about the team. Obviously, we're doing this pod after a victory, so it's probably been a little more positive than probably fans would have expected a day ago. It hasn't been a great road trip, Anthony, for the team. What do you see from this team right now? Obviously, last night they had to put a lot into it against a team that doesn't score easily at home, but it doesn't get easier, even though they get the Devils on a second back-to-back. I've been watching the Devils. They are on point with their game right now. What do you see right now, and what do you expect in New Jersey?
Well, I think the game against New York was important for Minnesota. I really thought the Philadelphia game was too, only in that fans always overreact early in the season. And you and I think we're talking maybe after the game in Philadelphia or in Washington, and said, look, if you had a couple game stretch like this in January, people probably, it's not they wouldn't notice and they wouldn't be disappointed, but it wouldn't, when it's 40% of your season's games, it feels different. And, so I do think there's a little overreaction there. I also think you have to keep in mind that this is a team that was not exactly, they weren't overloaded with top six talent to start the season. And then you take away Matt Zuccarello and now Marco Rossi, and it's a team that's, you take two out of the top six out of just about any team in the NHL, and they're going to have a little bit more trouble scoring goals. But I thought the game in Washington was troubling only because it was a team that really looked slow, they looked tired. I always hesitate to use the term disinterested, but they looked like they were unwilling to fight. And I thought Heinz's comments post-game echoed that, where he just said simply, we weren't good enough. And number one, you have to be mentally tough. You have to be able to execute, but then you can't be the second most competitive team on the ice. And so I thought it was really important for the rest of this trip that not be the case again. And whether you won the games or lost the games, you had to at least play them the right way. And I thought the Wild did that in Philadelphia. It was a little bit of an ugly grinder type game. And, the only goal Philly gets in regulation is a goofy one from behind the net, from behind the goal line from Owen Tippett. But I thought then in New York, it was important that they followed that up. And it was. I thought it was probably their most complete. I think you used that term earlier in the show, their most complete game of the season. And I thought that was necessary. And you do have to find a way to win some of these games. As we've talked about so often, you can't dig yourself a hole, mm-hmm. and especially in the Central Division. So I think the way they rallied in Dallas, even though they lost the game, the way they responded in Philly on the second of back-to-backs after the dismal performance in Washington, the way they came out and maintained it for 60 minutes against the Rangers, those are the kind of games that this team is going to have to play. And they're going to have to find a way to win some of these 2-1, 3-1 games until you get Zuccarello and Rossi back in your lineup where you have the ability to score your way out of some trouble. And they're going to have to find a way to score. I don't know if Rossi will be back in New Jersey or not. Hines labeled him as day-to-day yesterday. But we know Zuccarello's not coming back for another 4 or 5 weeks. So somehow, some way, they've got to find a way to generate a little more offense. But I just thought the way they did it against New York is sustainable because their defense was active. They were harder on pucks along the boards. They weren't passive, retreating out of the zone as soon as the Rangers got control of the puck. Instead, they were stepping up and making the Rangers make 2 plays to escape. Whereas against Washington, it just felt like everything was in backpedal mode all night. And so, I think there have been some positive signs. I think Bouillam's game keeps getting better. I think Yurov's game keeps getting better. I thought Falstead was terrific in Philadelphia. I thought Gus was terrific in New York. And goaltending can keep you in these games until you get healthy. So I think there's a lot of things to like about the way things are going, but they've got to find a way to generate more offense and more scoring, particularly 5-on-5 in the next few games.
Yeah, Gus, I thought was really good in Washington as well. That game could have really gone off the rails. At least the Wild had a chance until they didn't. But they just could never get their game together in front of them. When we come back, I have Twitter questions for you, but I do want to talk to you about some players that I think are really struggling out of the gate. We'll be right back on Worst Seats in the House.
Royal Credit Union is your trusted advisor for all your business banking needs. Whether you're starting or growing a business, Royal offers a full suite of business account and lending solutions to meet the needs of your business now and into the future. Royal has business checking and savings accounts, business certificates and money markets, treasury management services, and business loans. Choose Royal Credit Union as your business's financial partner and get started today at rcu.org/Royal Business. Insured by NCUA. Loans subject to credit approval. Equal credit opportunity.
And I want to tell you about Twill in the Edina Galleria. Scott Dayton's Twill in the Edina Galleria. TwillMN.com is the website. I'm wearing my Johnny O hat. I'm wearing one of my many Peter Millar shirts. Johnny O and Peter Millar are 2 of my favorite brands out of Twill in the Edina Galleria. When I've been going to Wolves game lately, I've been wearing my Dingman shoes. I've been wearing my Brax pants, my either Peter Millar or Johnny O shirts, pullovers. The Wolves games are weird because they're really cold, and then they turn on the fire jets before the game and singe your eyebrows. You need to be prepared for all kinds of different temperatures in that building. And I just use all my Twill stuff. And as we do more shows here at TalkWork.com on video, I'll be wearing more Twill stuff because it's really simple. I don't always try to look good. Sometimes I'm very happy being a slob, and I wear old sweats and T-shirts. If I'm trying to look presentable in any way, Talk North meetings, sponsor meetings, big games, going out in public, going out to dinner, I just put on something I bought at Twill. It's just that simple. If I put on something I bought at Twill, I'm going to look good. I'm playing a Randy Shaver's golf tournament on Monday. I'm going to wear Twill stuff to that too. Golf, walk around town, dinner, whatever. TwillMN.com. Go to Twill in the Edina Galleria. They're laid back. They love talking sports. They're nice people. Tell them we sent you. You'll have a good time, and you'll end up walking out with something great.
Hey, have you been dreaming of a lake cabin lifestyle with boating, fishing, and family fun in northern Minnesota? Well, lately I've thought a lot about how cool it would be to have a getaway like so many Minnesotans. And if you're like me, you probably think that owning your own lakeside getaway is beyond your budget. Well, if you think lake cabin real estate prices keep going up, well, think again. This is Russo, and I'm here to tell you there is an affordable way to enjoy a cabin lifestyle and all that goes with it. And yes, I said affordable. I founded a Clamshell Beach Resort, which is located on the Whitefish chain of 14 lakes for you and your family to enjoy. Here's how. Clamshell has lake homes that offer deeded fractional ownership, and the keywords there are deeded and fractional. You own it. Imagine having 5 weeks a year to enjoy Clamshell with its beaches, pool, and lodge that's full of kids' activities. Is golf your game? There's a great golf course right across the road. Like winter sports? Well, you can go ice fishing, cross-country skiing, or snowmobiling right out the door at Clamshell. And there's no maintenance, no grass mowing, no snow removal. It's done all for you. And you can own a share of Clamshell Beach Resort at an affordable price. To learn more about ownership opportunities at Clamshell Beach Resort, go to cottagesonwhitefish.com or contact Pat Egan at 612-220-9819. That's cottagesonwhitefish.com or Pat Egan at 612-220-9819.
Back here, Worst Seat in the House, Michael Russo, Anthony LaPanza. Final segment of the show. October 27th is our next live show at Tuttle's. And, I'll tell you, Anthony, we talk about the Wild, and we're always in our little bubble, and you think it's the worst thing in the world. What do you think they're thinking in places like Calgary right now, or Los Angeles, or Edmonton, or Tampa Bay? I mean, Tampa Bay is the worst team in the Eastern Conference right now. Ottawa. There are a lot of teams that have gotten off to poor starts that you thought were going to be better. And then conversely, I mean, how about the Detroit Red Wings off to a 5-1 start? Montreal looks as good as we've seen. I think people have been surprised by the Pittsburgh Penguins off to a 4-2 start. Utah's been very good. The Wild will see them on their first game of the upcoming homestand. Seattle's been pretty good. Not very good last night against Philly. Chicago's come out strong out of the gate. Early season, small sample sizes, there are some surprising teams in the league.
There are, but I think what we're seeing is that the gap from the top teams to the bottom teams is smaller and smaller in most cases. And the some of it is just a really small sample size, and sometimes it's a schedule, sometimes it's who you're facing and when, and all of those things can create some misleading things. But it's crucial that for teams that are bubble teams or expected to be bubble teams coming in, and you mentioned a couple of them. I think Calgary is a team that some thought might make the playoffs this year, but they were for sure going to be on the edge. LA might fall into that category. St. Louis, Nashville certainly fall into that category. I mean, I think Minnesota you'd have to put in that spot. I don't think you and I both thought this was somewhat of a no-brainer playoff team, but if you look around the league, there's a lot of teams that I think you'd put in the same category. Utah certainly in that spot. So it's the teams that find a way to bank points at this time of the year that are going to be in a great spot at the end. And the teams to me that would scare me a little because of how good a start they're off to are the teams that you expected to be really good. And like Colorado, I thought they were the best team in the Central Division, and they've sprinted out 5-0-1, which they already might be in a spot where they're going to be really difficult to catch, and you're only 6 games into the season. So some of the others, the teams that are around the 500 mark, I think it's, you're still fine at this point. But your point is a good one, and that I referenced Mike Sullivan's comments from the Rangers perspective, and that was a team I thought of where I was like, think of the Wild fans are in a panic because they hadn't scored an even strength goal in a few games, and the not generating much. And you look at it and say, okay, but they're missing 2 of their top 6 forwards on a team that wasn't brimming with extra top 6 type forwards anyway. And here in New York, they're dealing with a team that hasn't scored a goal at home in 3 games. And Mika Zibanejad talking after the game, like, I have got to finish that. I've got to bear down. I mean, around the league, there are a ton of teams that right now are dealing with bigger problems or problems as big as anything facing the Minnesota Wild. And, look around the league. How many teams right now are within one game of, say, NHL 500. I hate to use the term 500 because the overtime losses, teams that have 50% of available points, and most divisions, you're talking about 5 teams, 6 teams that are something like 3-2-1, 3-4, 3-3-1, things like that.
Yeah, I mean, Tampa Bay, 1 win in 6 games. Who would have ever thunk that?
Right. Calgary's lost 6 in a row.
Yeah,
and they're a
and
team
blew the
that
game
last
night
against the playoffs by a point.
Yep. Well, I will say they need to. Obviously they got a game against New Jersey, against a very good Jersey team right now. Although Jersey again plays in Toronto tonight, so that's a game that you've got to get on them early and try to get pucks behind them and try to tire them out, knowing they're playing on the second back-to-back. But then the Wild come home for a 6-game, very important homestand, and they've got to bank points on this homestand because they've certainly given a lot of points away. And obviously on their 2 games at home so far, gave a point to Los Angeles and lost at home. But they got Utah and San Jose back-to-back games. Utah's a much better team, but those are winnable games. And you got Winnipeg coming to town. We know that the Wild have not played Winnipeg well the last couple years. And then they got the Penguins, Vancouver, and Nashville coming to town. I mean, these are winnable games that they've got to bank some points. I did want to talk to you about some of the blue liners. I think one concern that I have, at least in the early going, is we have definitely not seen the best out of Jake Middleton, Brock Faber, and Jared Spurgeon, Anthony. Jonas Berdine, same thing, looks a little rusty to start the season. What do you think of it? We made so much of David Juracek and Zeev Boyum and these couple of young guys, but the veteran defensemen have so far gotten off to slow starts.
Well, they have, but I thought in New York, every single one of those guys looked more like themselves. I thought Spurgeon had one of his better games of the year. He was active offensively. I thought Brodin had one of his better games of the year. I thought Faber looked a lot more stable. And the Middleton Juracek thing is interesting. I asked John Hines about it coincidentally before the game last night. That first game where they were paired together because Hines didn't want to put Juracek on the same D pairing with Bouillon and have the 2 rookies together. So he moved Middleton down to the third pair, moved Bouillon up to play with Spurgeon. And I thought that night Middleton and Juracek struggled, but I asked him about it because I didn't think Middleton was great. I thought Juracek struggled a little, but I thought Middleton wasn't great either. And he said, I think it was just both of them were a little bit off, and it probably made them both. It wasn't great for either one of them. But I thought last night they looked just fine together. Juracek made a couple plays. I thought Juracek was good the game before as well, but I think they made some plays, and there were a couple plays. Louis made mention of this during the broadcast last night, that Juracek's size and length made a factor. It was a positive factor on winning some puck battles on the wall, on getting to some pucks. I thought Brodin and Faber have just looked a little bit off early this season, but I thought last night against the Rangers, they looked more like themselves. I wouldn't be concerned about those 2 guys or Jared Spurgeon really in any way. You know what you're going to get from those guys. They're always going to have the occasional off night, but over the course of 82, you know what you're going to get from Brodin, Spurgeon, and Faber. And if that's your concern, then your team's probably in a good spot. I think Juracek has continued to. I mean, it was interesting. He only went to Iowa for 1 game, but when he came back up and when Hines had sent him down, he had talked about when the Wild had sent him down. Hines talked about some of the things they wanted to see from him, and one of them that he mentioned was penalty kill. Well, he only went down there for 1 game, but they immediately needed him on the penalty kill that next night back in the NHL because there was a spot where with Bogosian out. And Bouillon's not going to kill penalties for you. And a defenseman was in the penalty box. You only had 4 defensemen left, and they wound up having to use Juracek quite a bit on the penalty kill that night.
Yeah, and hopefully everybody saw the insider that I wrote with Joe Smith the other day. I had a long conversation with Alex Goligoski while we were in Dallas and about opening night. And we talked about this on last week's pod, right in the booth to the left of Anthony. There was Alex Goligoski that took it upon himself to sit down with David Juracek, watch the first 2 periods of the Blue Jackets game. Between the first and second period, pulled out the laptop and went over a bunch of clips with Juracek. And that's a great mentor to have. And a guy that's played 1,000 games in the organization, now working as a development guy for the Wild, and he sits down with David Juracek, and this is what they need. And Juracek, as we've seen, he's got all the raw talent. He's got the size. I think he's got the skating. I think this fallacy that he couldn't skate when he got to Minnesota is beyond belief ridiculous. Is it awkward at times? Of course. But it's more just the positioning and the decision making and being coached that David Juracek you can get better at. And if you have somebody like Alex Goligoski that's been there, done that, and not too long ago. This is somebody that's barely out of the NHL. I think that's a huge, huge coup for the Wild to have him working with Juracek. So I think that's great.
Well, yeah, I agree. Yeah. And just a couple numbers from last night, just to support what we're talking about. Juracek last night, when he was on the ice, I think at 5-on-5, his expected goals for was like 60.5. And, that's playing on a third set with Middleton. But then the Faber-Brodin combo was really good last night. I think the shots on goal, I don't have it in front of me, but 5-on-5 shots on goal when they were on the ice. And I might have them flipped. For one of them, I think it was Faber, it was 17-4, and Brodin, it was 12-4. And I might have those two flipped where it was the other way around. But bottom line is that's more like what those guys have brought over the years. And let's keep in mind, that Ranger club, I think they're going to struggle a little bit with their depth and their third and fourth lines, but their top two lines there's some talent. And going against Panarin and Zibanejad is no easy task. That's a combo that's had a lot of success in the NHL.
Yep. And to your point, Faber 17-4, Brodin 12-4, and man, was the Eriksson Ek line outstanding last night. Eriksson Ek shot 4 and against 11-5 when he was on the ice. Matt Boldy 13-5, and Kirill Kaprizov 11-5. So as the eye test showed, it's supported by the metrics there on how good they were and how much time they spent in the offensive zone. Let's go to some Twitter questions and then we'll wrap up the show, Anthony. Mateo asked, if David Juracek doesn't go backward developmentally from where he's been in the past few games, do you think his most recent stint has earned him the right to keep that third pair defense spot when Zach Bogosian is healthy? What do you think? It's a really good question, because remember, I thought they came into the year expecting that Bogosian would be the seventh D, and then obviously Juracek didn't show that he was ready right off the hop, and Bogosian is somebody that you know what you're getting from him. But what do you think there?
Yeah, I think that's to be determined yet. And it's similar to the question we've had all throughout the summer and training camp with the forwards, is that there's going to be a point where Juracek is a better player than Zach Bogosian. And that point, it might be sooner rather than later. It might be middle of this season. Right now, I think it depends a little bit on the night, depends a little bit on what you need. And, the both of these guys are likely to be in Minnesota's lineup when you look over the course of the season, as they've learned these last couple of years. You don't only just need 7 defensemen these days. You might need 8 or 9. And if it's a time where, let's say, Jared Spurgeon's banged up, Juracek's probably the guy, because you might need him to run a second power play. I know Brock Faber's had some experience there too, but they're trying to take that off of his plate, and maybe Juracek's the guy. If it's a night where you're more concerned about a physical level of an opponent, maybe it's Zach Bogosian. So I think we probably see both of them, but I also think a lot of this is on David Juracek. What does he do in these next few games when given the opportunity? And it's largely the conversation that we had with guys like Yurov and Ogren. And when given opportunity, if you seize it and show something along the lines of the promise and the talent level that got you to be drafted where you were drafted, maybe you just never give the job back. But there are also going to be nights where young players make mistakes, and you have a little bit more dependability factor with the veteran guys. So if some of this depends on Zeev Buium. If Zeev Buium proves that he can play in the top 4, now your needs are different. But if he can't, and Jake Middleton has to move up, well, now it's probably Bogosian on the third set, because you don't want to have the 2 rookies playing together. So there's just so many factors that could dictate this. But first and foremost, it's David Juracek. how well does he
Yeah.
play when given the opportunity here and with Bogosian out of the lineup?
Right. And again, the reality is that if Bogosian is somebody that is going to play over David Juracek, if they feel like Iowa is a better place for him to work out the kinks in his game and play 25 minutes a night, what they did the other day by sending him down is not going to change. I think that development is much more important. You don't want him making those mistakes on the blue line in Minnesota if you can work on him down there and get a ton of minutes. So I don't know if a lot has changed just based on a couple games. So they are 1-1, in Juracek's 2 games back. So let's not, just because they won a game, try to, anoint him as your top right shot D right now. Nat asks, with John Hines, I'm going to let you answer this because I have a feeling this is the type of thing that'll draw your ire. Matt says, with Hines just being okay the last 2 years, how much of a leash does he get? With Peter DeBoer just waiting for his next job, would love to get that guy here. What are your thoughts on both on how Hines could have, how much long Hines could have here in Peter? I think I'll answer it first. I mean, first of all, Pete DeBoer is making a lot of money to just sit on the sideline and essentially scout for Hockey Canada right now in advance of being the assistant coach for Team Canada in the Olympics. So he's making a lot of money. I don't know if he's jumping for a job. And 2, if you're going to get Pete DeBoer here, you're going to have to pay a ton of money and pay off John Hines not to work. I just don't think that is an option here. I know there's a ton of respect between Bill Guerin. And the other thing is, I think Bill Guerin looks at this roster and realizes what Max Zuccarello and Nico Sturm's injuries has done to him. And is not making it is not going to sit there and blame John Hines for the lack of depth on this roster right now. Anthony, what say you?
Yeah, I don't think I have no reason to believe John Hines' job is in jeopardy. Every coach in the NHL's job is in jeopardy if you drop 7 out of 8 or 8 out of 10 when you're expected to be a contender. So, I mean, anything could change. But at this point, I don't think Billy Guerin's looking at this saying that he thinks there's a coaching deficiency here. I think you're exactly right on the state of the roster. Well, I think the roster is good enough to contend and expected to contend. And Billy has never made any bones about the fact that he doesn't care who's in the lineup or who's out of the lineup. We're here to win games. But at the same time, everybody's a realist enough to look at the roster and say, okay, but if you take Matt Zuccarello, you take Marco Rossi, you take Nico Sturm, you take Zach Bogosian all out of the lineup, there's going to be some bumps. Now, if all those guys come back and the team's still struggling, I mean, every coach's job is on the line at all times. But I don't think the Wild are anywhere close right now to John Hines' job being in jeopardy, and I don't think it makes any difference the fact that there's a guy named Pete DeBoer out there that's out of work right now. That's not to say Pete DeBoer's not a great coach. It's not to say he's not a guy that Billy Guerin would have interest in if he was searching for a coach. I don't know that he would be, but I don't know that he wouldn't. I'm just saying that at this point right now, nobody's looking at this saying if the Wild don't win in New Jersey on Wednesday night, John Hines is going to be on the unemployment line.
Yeah. I mean, it's not John Hines' fault that Liam Ogren came up and didn't even come close to grabbing a full-time job on this team. I mean, and everybody knows the debates that Anthony and I've had about Liam Ogren and how so probably there's nobody more disappointed than me to see him perform the way he did. But he needed to get his act together, and he never did. And he was given every ample opportunity to in training camp and then to start the season.
And he'll get another opportunity.
Yeah,
he's still
but
part of the future of this organization, but he just
Yeah.
wasn't ready now.
Yeah, exactly. All right, AJ asks, how is Damon Hunt stuck right back in limbo? Is there a chance we trade him to get an opportunity elsewhere? I mean, look, it sucks that he's back in limbo because this doesn't help his play to not be playing. Like, at least if he was in Cleveland, he'd be playing every day. And it's so, even though he's making his NHL salary right now, I'm sure that they're going to want to get him in at some point. But I mean, we knew when they grabbed him off waivers, we knew that Jonas Brodin was right around the corner. So, like, if people didn't realize that this was just an insurance policy to have another left shot defenseman on this team because they didn't think that Carson Lambos was ready to be that guy. I think that you were fooling yourself. He's not playing over Boyum. He's not playing over Jake Middleton. He's not playing over Jonas Brodin. So that's just the way it is. Now, at some point, I think they'll probably have to go to him and say, hey, will you take a 2-week rehab stint down in Iowa to get to playing some games? They'll try to, I think at some point, correlate that with the Iowa Wild schedule, where you can get the most amount of games that you could possibly get on a little conditioning stint and just get them playing, because this isn't good for anybody. But look, if they throw him right back on waivers, Columbus is just going to take him. And if nobody else puts in a claim, they'd be able to stick him right in Cleveland. They'd be the only team that could do that. So look, this is just going to have to be his lot in life, Anthony, right?
Yeah, and there's, like we were just talking about, there's a pretty good chance that at some point over the course of the season that the Wild, just like everybody else in the league, will be on their 8th, 9th defenseman. And when that time comes, I think they have confidence that Damon Hunt can step in and be an adequate player. But yeah, he isn't right now. He isn't going to supplant any of the 3 left shot defensemen that are in your lineup. And
if Zach Bogosian was not a right shot D, Damon Hunt would have played the other night in Philadelphia. But Bogosian got hurt. They only had 2 right shot D in their lineup, so they recalled David Juracek. If it was Brodin, Boyum, or Middleton out, Hunt would have played. I mean, that's just the lot in life. Unless he could be ambidextrous, that's what it's going to be. Jonah asks, do you envision less work for Gus because Wallstedt has really been good, or do you think that they'll just continue giving Gus the games that have been mapped out for him? Obviously, he's, of his 4 or 5 starts, he's probably had 2 games that I think that he wasn't great in. One, the Columbus game, and one maybe the game in Dallas. But for the most part, Gus has been as good, as he should have gotten a lot better play in front of him in Washington. That was not his fault. So what do you think?
Yeah, I think Gus is still your guy. And I think Wallstedt has played really well. I thought he was really good. I was so impressed with his feet and his pads, and his mobility, his movement in the net in the game in Philadelphia. But Gus is the guy. And I still think the Wild are probably, I don't know that they have an exact number, but 55-25 type split between the two of them over the course of the year would be my guess. And all of that can always change. And if Gus started to struggle, I think Wallstedt is showing more and more that he's closer and closer to being ready to carry a bigger load. But right now, I mean, this is Gus. And I thought Gus was really good at some key points in the game against the Rangers. My guess is Gus will play again against New Jersey. Then there's a couple off days during the homestand. There's a set of back-to-backs. So you'll see Wallstedt there, and hopefully he just continues to show that he's ready to potentially push Gus a little bit and be there if and when they need him.
Yep. Somebody asked about signing bonuses and why players want them. I mean, I think the big thing is to get your money right away. You could kind of put it to work, so to speak, whether it's investing. I don't think you get a real tax break. You don't get escrow break, all that stuff. Trevor goes, what's it going to take to get Tage here? I mean, 1, he's going to have to get out. 2, it would take a ton. I mean, remember, the Wild had an interest in JJ Peterka, and there were players that the Wild offered that Buffalo had no interest in. So I don't think it's going to be an easy deal if that ever came into fruition. I think the big one that, I'll be interested in is Panarin. Anthony, what do you think of Panarin? Like, I think that is somebody the Wild are going to target in free agency next summer, or even at the trade deadline if the Rangers aren't good enough. Panarin, he hasn't been able to elevate his game in the playoffs, and has gotten off to a so-so start to the season. What do you think?
Well, I think there's a whole bunch of teams that would target him. I have no idea what the price tag would be, whether it be as a free agent or in a trade. We saw last night that he still has incredible skill. I mean, we are talking about a guy that scored 120 2 years ago, and last year, and what if you want to say he slipped, he only scored, I think he had 90 points last year, if I remember right, and has played 82, maybe 3 years in a row, or over 83 years in a row, I think. So that's a guy who's dependable and he scores. So without a doubt, I think the Wild would at least kick the tires, so to speak, and see what it would take to get him. But I have no idea if it's possible or not. I haven't. This goes back to the whole bet on contracts things. I have no idea. I haven't looked at what other teams might have to spend, where he might be a fit, any of that kind of stuff. So I don't know. But the short as a player, absolutely, the Wild would love to have him.
Yeah. Alex Tuch is still the guy that I think would fit much better here if the Wild went after him in free agency, but he is going to get, if he gets to free agency, I mean, he is going to get overpaid, quote unquote. Where Panarin, if you get him on a short-term deal at his age, is probably a good player, and it probably also fills in the role. Like, you're going to lose Tarasenko most likely after this year. Zuki, we don't know what his future is, but he's in the final year of his deal. So on a short-term deal, Panarin actually makes a ton of sense, and same agent. And look, I've been predicting Panarin coming to Minnesota for a long time. So it would not shock me if that's the guy. Final couple questions of the show. They're fun ones. Jack Woolery asked, in 2023, Joe Smith wrote about how Kaprizov took Middleton and Spurgeon to try Russian food at Marivana in Manhattan. Have either of you been there? I have not. Joe Smith has. Actually, Joe did a story on the restaurant. And then Jack asked, and do you know if Yurov went there on the most recent trip? I don't believe he went there on the most recent trip. I know that the Wild took them there for one of their Becoming Wild issues before the season. But have you been to Marivana? Russian food doesn't seem like you're, as I said to Jake Middleton the other day about offense, Marivana doesn't seem like your cup of tea.
Yeah, I would say not. I'm trying to remember. I went to, what's the name of the place in St. Paul? Moscow on the Hill.
Yeah.
I went one time, and so I believe, to the best of my knowledge, that's the only time I've had Russian food. And you're right, it's not my type of food, and so I'd be a poor judge of whether or not it's a good spot.
I did go to the Russian Tea Room in New York City once, and years ago, I went to a Russian bar here in Vegas and actually ran into Pavel Bure there. But I can't remember what that was. I don't know if that's even still around. Jacob asks, will Zuki get his place on the first power play when it comes back, given how great it's been? I would think that most likely he will, Anthony, right?
I can't imagine. I can't imagine a power play that doesn't have Zuccarello on it. I think the bigger question is the other spot, so to speak, because you're going to have Boldy, you're going to have Bouillon, you're going to have Kaprizov, you're going to have Zuccarello. Then is it? I know that right now Eriksson Ek has been that net front guy. Would it be worth trying to get one right shot guy somewhere in the middle and maybe have Eriksson Ek be on your other power play? You like to start with the puck, and he's been your best face-off guy. That's, to me, the only question. I think Zuccarello, without a doubt, lands on that top power play.
Yep. Hunky and Chucky says you both have mentioned in the past that the scoring woes continue, that Billy Guerin might have his hand forced and add a piece to the top six. Who is even available at this point? I will tell you that I talked to a GM yesterday for about 20 minutes, and he said, like, nobody's available. He's like, yeah, you can get Nick Robertson right now. But, Nick Robertson hasn't been able to really find a firm spot in Toronto's lineup forever. And I don't know if Nick Robertson is somebody you're going to add to the top six. It's not a top six forward. I did hear when Nico Sturm got hurt and Jack Roslovic turned him down, the Wild were considering or made a call to Pittsburgh about Nola Cherry. The price was high. Nola Cherry is not definitely somebody that would fit that mold. I think that would have been more of a, fill-in guy. But obviously Yurov looks like he has taken that spot right now. So not a lot of guys available. Final question of the show comes from Brianna, Anthony. Favorite places to eat in DC, Philly, and Vancouver?
DC, Philly, and Vancouver. That's a heck of a trip.
You know where Louis sent me in Washington last time I was in Washington, I believe it was out in Georgetown. It was a restaurant called Cafe Milano.
Cafe Milano is awesome. I have been there.
Yeah, incredible.
And Louis and I tried to go there the other night in Georgetown, but it was booked because the international banking conference or something was going on, and they had reserved the whole restaurant. Wow. So we went to a place called Philomena that night, it was awesome. Louis had set up a table for the Wild coaching staff as well, so they were there at the same time. But that was terrific. The other place, Washington, to me, has not been my favorite food town. There's good spots, but they're not, like Old Ebbitt Grill is a really cool vibe, but the food is just okay. I do love going to Off the Record for cocktails afterward, which I know you and I have spent some nights there that have been great. So I'd recommend that. But out in Georgetown, go to either Cafe Milano or Filomena. In Vancouver, I like the Black and Blue Steakhouse. Gotham is also good if you're looking for steak. There was a good Italian place, but I don't think it's open anymore. Just kind of old school Italian called Zeffirelli's. There's a decent Italian place with a good jazz bar next door right by the rink called Frankie's. And I don't remember what the name of the Italian place is that's connected to it, but they serve their food in the jazz bar at Frankie's. But check out the Italian place next door. That's pretty good. In Philly, I love the old place that we used to go, Dante and Luigi's, down that place. It looks like it's in that old house. But if you're right in the downtown area, I love Le Grand Cafe Aquilia is good. And I'd say that's probably the best. Those are the best two Italian places I've gone in Philadelphia.
Yeah. The names of the restaurants. I'm not the big into the names. I just go where you tell me to go. So, Anthony, fun show. Again, October 27th is our next live show, and that'll be a fun one. That's at Tuttle's final show. That we gotta come up with our dates for November. Anthony, we'll have to chat right after this pod and send some options. But thanks again to our incredible sponsors and for joining us in the Aquarius Home Services studio. Aquarius Home Services, your local authorized dealer for Connecticut water treatment systems, clamshell beach resorts, Onyx Maps, Twilling Galleria, Real Credit Union, and Stretch Lab. Thanks, everybody.
So much coming out, there's nothing going in. I know that you feel like you're never gonna win. Oh, but the world